Do we not go on air? Is that
Oh, we're
shouldn't the
good.
on air button be, or is it recording right now?
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. I guess cut this out. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the brand new Armchair All-American Major League Baseball podcast. We're humbly calling it Armchair at the Plate. I'm Jacob Bollinger. To my virtual left is Donnie Menke. We will be your host on this weekly podcast, recapping the biggest stories, rumors, happenings in Major League Baseball. It will be weekly, and we'll be talking about those events that happened in the past week. This week will be a little bit different as we want to catch up on everything that's happened this year in baseball, just in case you haven't been paying attention. I'll let my partner introduce himself first.
All right, I'm Donnie Mankey. I'm the team manager for the Reds on the Armchair site. One-man department for my team. Uh, Hope to impart some knowledge or something along those lines. Hope bring you a nice podcast to listen to.
Yeah, like I said, I'm Jacob Bollinger. I'm the sole Pittsburgh Pirates writer and team manager. So again, army of one, just like Donnie here. Yeah, and I'm hoping that this podcast can be your go-to source for some baseball news, just in case people are busy and you don't get to hear everything that happens in the week. But Donnie and I, are big enough baseball fans and fanatics, really, to be
Yeah.
more specific, that we know what happens during the week. So let's start off first with what the standings have been for this season. You want to take it away, Donnie?
All right. Um, you can't not talk about the Dodgers when you're talking about the standings. As of the time of recording this podcast, they have 89 wins in 124 games, which is good for a 71.8 winning percentage and is good for 21 games over the Arizona Diamondbacks, who would be in first place in the NL Central right now. The Dodgers' historic pace most of the year. They're running away with the NL. They're 14 games over the second place Nationals in the NL. And they have, what is it, 89 wins, so they're 13 games over anybody else in baseball, including the Houston Astros. So, and those Astros are running away with the AL too. They have well, maybe not recently, but they still have a 4-game lead on the Red Sox in the entire AL. They have an 11.5 game lead on the Angels. If it had not had, excluding the Carlos Correa injury, the Astros have been far and away the best team in the AL this season.
Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of been a weird year. There's not been a whole lot of parity. There's been a lot of times where the divisions are kind of already over, and they were over by June almost. If the Dodgers win tonight against the Pittsburgh Pirates, they will have 90 wins, and they will be the fifth team in Major League history to have 90 wins in 125 games. Last I checked, the Dodgers are currently matching the Seattle Mariners pace for most wins in a season. So they have a chance at history. Whether or not they'll do that, I'm not sure. Something else to note is the Dodgers are a 21 game lead on the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Arizona Diamondbacks are the number one National League wildcard team. That is a giant,
Yeah,
absolute giant lead. And it's over a playoff contender, which makes it even more
right.
crazy. It's not like it's some trash team or anything. So we've talked about both West standings. I guess we haven't talked about the American League. And the American League, the Astros are running away with their division. The Angels have been surprising. They're in the wild card chase, and then the Mariners and the Texas Rangers are both close enough to make it interesting. But like we said, the Astros are running away with that division. So let's talk about the AL and NL Central.
Disappointing this year. You got the Cubs and the Indians both coming off that epic 7-game World Series. Looked like they were gonna dominate again this year. Nothing really changed. Neither of them had many key losses. And the Indians actually their lineup got better with the addition of Encarnacion, but they're still barely holding on. Again, they're clinging to a 4.5 game lead over the supposedly rebuilding Minnesota Twins. They they wouldn't. Let's see. If you were to stick them into any other division, they would only be leading the NL Central.
Yeah, they've been disappointing for sure. The Twins, like they've been doing for the last couple of years, are in a rebuilding phase, but yet definitely playing above what we would expect them to play, or how well we'd expect them to play. I don't know if it's magic or maybe that they just know how to rebuild and still semi win at the same times, which would make it kind of scary whenever they finish rebuilding. They do
Right.
have some impressive pieces. Um, Detroit Tigers, they fell out of the race pretty quickly and started trying to sell off their really old pieces. White Sox have been rebuilding all year. The tank is in full effect for sure. The Royals
Yep.
are kind of just outside the pace. They're 6 games back of the Indians, and they're close enough to strike in the wild card, but it's not quite. I think what Kansas City had imagined when they decided to not trade any of their big players at the trade
Right.
deadline. As far as the Central goes, I would say it's the most competitive division in all of baseball. And it's really, which is really, really funny because at the beginning of the year, everyone said Chicago Cubs are going to win this hands down. It's going to be a joke. The Cubs didn't
Yeah.
gain the lead in the NL Central until I think like July after the All Star break, like July 20th or
Right.
something like that.
They were mediocre at best, really. They were floating
Yeah,
around 500 ball.
yeah. The
And
offense couldn't hit, pitching couldn't pitch. It was very strange. Um, so the Milwaukee Brewers were the surprise story for the majority of the season. They've since fallen off the pace, and now 2.5 games behind the Cubs. But
but
they've
still
kind
right
of,
there.
yeah, they're still right there. And September's coming up, and that's a big month where there's a bunch of interdivision games. So NL Central is definitely up for grabs.
Everybody in that division's within 8 games except for the Reds.
Yeah, Pirates would need a miracle to make it back, but I guess it's possible. They do play their next 34 games or something like that, or against division rivals. So it's plenty of opportunity, but they haven't been playing so hot.
No.
So if we move over to the East Coast, we got the Nationals leading, and we've got the Boston Red Sox leading the divisions.
The Red Sox they didn't come on until a little bit, till recently, but they've been pumping out win after win. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They look like with Rafael Devers coming up, look like they finally filled that hole at third base. They look like they're set to make some noise here down the stretch.
Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, the Yankees were leading that division for a long time, kind of like the Brewers. They were supposed to be rebuilding, and instead they were out, just literally out hitting everybody. Um, so yeah, the Red Sox finally took a commanding lead. They're 4.5 games up, so it's not over yet. But the two teams are trending in opposite directions. When we did a earlier version of this podcast that didn't actually air because it was really just a practice for us, I said I expected the Rays to get the wild card. So apparently I cursed them because they have not been good, and they are now 11 games behind, and they're also falling far behind in the wild card race.
3 games below
Um,
500.
yeah, so watch out, team that I say is going to be at the wild card this time. There's a curse. I'm giving it out. Uh, there's not really much to talk about in the NL East. The Nationals are running away. The Marlins just got to 500, I believe, yesterday.
Thanks
Um,
to Stanton.
yes, definitely on the back of Juan Carlos Stanton. The New York Mets, I guess, are the big news in that one, where everybody got injured, and this team is surprisingly significantly below 500. Um,
Right.
got any takes on the Mets training staff?
What are they doing?
Yes,
They seem like they've horribly mismanaged most of these injuries. I mean, how many injuries was it to their rotation? Key pieces to their rotation at that, Jacob deGrom.
the think it was four, definitely like four different pitchers, like starting pitchers, and then a couple more of the bullpen guys, or not bullpen guys, but the guys who came up to replace them also got injured.
Right. I mean, I don't know if there's something in the locker room, the water, whatever, that's making these guys get injured so easy, but you might want to question the training staff a little bit.
Yeah, I don't see how the Mets don't fire the training staff this offseason. I don't see, or at least if they don't fire the training staff, then you fire the guy who's in charge of pitching development. Because all these major
Yeah.
injuries are coming to arms of their pitchers. And honestly, you can't go through anyone in their rotation and be like, oh, he didn't get an injury. Matt Harvey had Tommy John a couple of years ago and then has a new injury. Jacob DeGrom went down, I think, last year. 2 years ago. No, I can't remember. Jake DeGrom went down with an injury at some point
Yeah.
recently. Thor went down with an injury earlier this season. And a couple other guys who aren't as bigger names, but they've all gone down with injuries.
Yeah.
On the flip side, or not on the flip side, but in a similar vein, the other 2016 wildcard team, the San Francisco Giants, have suffered the same fate as the Mets. Now, this time it wasn't because of injuries, but for whatever reason, they're in last place in the NL West. They're worse than the San Diego Padres, a team that's been rebuilding for 2 years and really not gotten anywhere.
Right. It's for their 40 games out of first place.
Oh my, that's
It's just
that's
sad.
insane. Yeah, it is sad. It's especially
It
from a
also
team
speaks to
that,
the Dodgers, though.
yeah, that's a fair point. Although, I mean, the Giants have all of 51 wins.
Right.
And I guess you can attribute that some of that to the fact that Madison Bumgarner got on a dirt bike on 420 and then wrecked it and wrecked his shoulder. And I didn't play a game until I think June or July.
Yeah.
Um, so that hurts, but I mean, one pitcher does not mean you only get 51 wins. They've got problems all over the place.
Their
And I,
defense is historically bad.
yeah, and honestly, that kind of like mini dynasty that they were making by winning every other year, I think it's over. Like they're in a
Yeah.
bad spot where they can't rebuild because they don't have any guys. They aren't willing to trade the guys who would get them the most, like Madison Bumgarner and Buster Posey. Like they're not going to trade those guys away, but no one else on the team has enough value that they can get a bunch of prospects back.
Yeah. I mean, and with the Giants, they don't have that strong of a farm system either, is their biggest problem. They didn't seem like they don't seem like they've drafted very well. They've got one of the it's not only lacking potential superstars, it seems like it's lacking overall depth too. And when you're lacking both, that's a major problem when you don't want to trade those big guys that could get you guys like that, who could strengthen your system like that.
Yeah, I guess that's just the cost of winning championships. They got 3 and 6 years. I think they'll be all right for a little bit. Um, so who do you got? Who do you got in the playoffs? We
In the
won't talk about.
playoffs,
Yeah, who you got?
obviously the Dodgers, Nationals, Astros. For the rest of the NL, I think the Cubs do end up winning that division just because I think they're too talented
Yeah,
not to. For the wild card, Diamondbacks and Rockies. I don't think there's any question about that. They're 69 and 68 wins. The closest is Milwaukee, who's 2 games back of them, or 3 games back of them, excuse me. Um, and but the Brewers they've looked better lately, but not sure that they're going to be able to keep it up because they just
yeah. Well, I think they've just been. I think they've been overachieving all year. The
yeah
offense performed about how you would expect them. They just hit a bunch of home runs. The pitching though was
yeah
surprising, and they just actually kept people down instead of letting runs go by. And I don't think that was a factor of them actually being good. I think it's just a factor of them basically getting lucky, not necessarily getting lucky, but just playing to the best ability they could for a couple of
right
months. And I think now it's time where they start showing their true talent, which is what's going to sink them, I think.
exactly. And
So
they
American League wild card, what do you got?
American League wild card. I'm sticking with my Yankees. They've been my pick for a while. Um, the other wild card is up for grabs. With Mike Trout back, I'm going to have to pick the Angels in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I can respect that. The Angels, to me, are really, really surprising because they do not have pitching at all.
Right.
But somehow their offense is putting up enough runs to do it to maybe win games. And yeah, Mike Trout's back, but Andrelton Simmons, famously defensive wizard with a noodle for a bat, figured
Yeah.
out how to hit a baseball this year and hit a baseball well. And so he's turning into quite literally one of their best players. Now he's not going to eclipse Trout because that's impossible,
Yeah.
but he's up there. He's definitely making up for the aging of Albert Pujols, and he's making up for the lack of depth throughout the Angels, which was not something you would have said about Simmons to begin the year.
Absolutely not. That his hitting's kind of come out of nowhere.
Yep. So for me, I'm going to go with division winners in the National League with Nationals, Cubs, and the Dodgers. I think for the National League, I think Diamondbacks are going to win it outright. I think Colorado has a chance at it, it has a chance at it. But I think what's going to happen is either the Milwaukee Brewers or the St. Louis Cardinals are going to represent the second wild card because I feel like the Colorado Rockies have been on a downslide recently, especially with their young pitching. They put a lot of innings on those arms, and it's stressful pitching in cores. So I think the Rockies are going to slide out, and one of those two teams, Brewers or Cardinals, are going to slip in.
That's fair. I mean, the Rockies, they have been putting a lot of innings on their young arms. It's just a question of whether they'll hold up.
Yeah. On the American League side, going to go with the Red Sox. The Indians are going to win the Central, and then obviously the Astros. Um, wild card picks. I don't believe in the Yankees. They've been trending downward for a while. Aaron Judge, who was a big part of their offense, has finally cooled off and actually just ended his
37
strikeout
games.
37 game strikeout streak last night. Um, and they keep losing pitchers to injuries. Like I think Tanaka got placed on the DL last week at some point. It was only like the 10-day, so it wasn't like a long one, but um, that's still a significant pitcher to go down.
Yeah.
Aroldis Chapman, their closer, all of a sudden can't close anymore, and he's cost them a couple of games. But that's not as big a deal because they have
They've
Dylan
got like,
Betances, and
and yeah,
yeah,
and
you're
they've got
right.
a few other closer level
And a couple other
guys.
ones. But you can't tell me that the team is still going to be as good without Chapman. Now I know Chapman's been bad, and so they're going to give him some chances to figure it out. But when
Right.
Chapman is at his best, like that's when the team's going to be at this best, obviously. Um,
Right.
so I think the Angels are gonna get that wild card spot, and that second one it's just so hard to tell. You know,
Could
I
be a
kind of
lot at this point.
Seattle Mariners have flirted with being good and then being bad. So they're in it. But and the Rays are out. I can't say Rays again, and so maybe it will be the Yankees in the second spot. I don't know. It's just too hard to tell. I wouldn't count out Kansas City. I think they still got some devil magic in them. You never know when they might go on a tear.
If the
But
rotation gets hot, it's very possible.
yeah, I'm realizing as I'm talking, it seems like I really believe in baseball magic. I've mentioned it like four times already. It's real, guys. It's real.
Very real.
Uh, so that's how the standings have worked out so far. But we've had a couple really surprising rookies. Uh, just
Yeah, I
incredible
mean,
rookies out of nowhere, almost.
yeah. Like, I don't think anybody expected Aaron Judge to come up and hit the way he did in the first half of the season. Like, everybody knew he had power. You knew that much by watching his game. You could tell by looking at him. I mean, what, the dude's 6'7"?
Yeah, he's built like a linebacker.
And right. And he came out and he's hit 37 home runs so far. The problem is, what is it? 30 of them came before the All-Star break.
Something like that. He was mashing the ball. But so now he's been hitting lately. He's been hitting like you would expect a hitter like that to hit. He's big and tall. You would expect him to have these holes in his zone, and you would expect him to strike out a lot, which he has
Right.
been lately. But at the beginning of the
Lately.
year, before the All Star break, I think he was hitting. I think it was over 300,
He was in
and
toward the top of the Triple Crown race.
yeah, you're right. He was. I mean, he was just hitting these balls. Every time he hit a ball, it was for a base hit. It found grass, or it went out over the fence. Like it just anytime he hit the ball, it just didn't get caught. And he, I mean,
Right.
part of it was luck, but I mean, he was also that's what happens when you hit the ball as hard as when you have as much muscle as he does. You just have to hit the
Yeah.
ball, and it literally could just go right through somebody's glove, and then well, that's a hit.
I mean, how many times did he break Statcast?
Oh, yeah, he was very very impressive. On the National League side, Cody Bellinger, who'd been a he's a top tier prospect. I don't think he ever reached like number one or anything like that. But he's a first baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He came out and he started hitting a bunch of home runs. Not quite at the pace as Judge did, but Judge was. I mean, it was insane how well he was doing. But Bellinger's leading the NL rookie race,
Yeah.
just almost just without question. Um, he's been very, very, very good. What's impressive to me is his versatility. He can hit, or he not, he can field first base. He has also a passable left fielder and a right fielder, and he can play some center field, which is insane
Yeah.
for a man of his size and for somebody who's a standard first baseman.
I mean, and he's outside of his power at the plate too. He's batting 272. He gets on base at a 352 rate. I mean, his OPS is 965.
That's for a rookie. That's
Oh,
just he hasn't really
that's
slumped yet
incredible.
either. I don't feel
No,
like
he
he's
hasn't.
really. I think he's gone through probably like a couple rough patches, but he's never really had that point where he's like been bad for a month.
Right. Not like Judge.
Yeah, no. Judge is. I think he's hitting 130 something or something really really bad like that.
Yeah, since the All-Star break or something. Because his
Yeah,
average has fallen all the way to 284.
yeah, and it was crazy crazy high a while
It was
back.
in what, 330s? Somewhere
Yeah,
around
it
there.
really. Yeah, so I got the splits here. Well, in the last 28 days, he's hit 179. But but the thing is, though, he is like all of a sudden he's not hitting, but he's still walking.
Yeah,
He
his
has
on
an
base percentage is still really good.
in the last month his on base is 349. And then I heard earlier today he is I think 5 walks away from matching the rookie total or the rookie leader in walks, which would be Ted Williams.
He has
He's
93, I
yeah,
think, to this point.
and I think they said it was 95 is the record for most walks by a rookie,
Wow.
set by Ted Williams, arguably the greatest hitter of all time.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's how the rookie of the year situations are shaking out. So let's talk about season awards. Who's your MVP?
That's tough right now. In the AL, it was looking like Judge for a little bit, and then he went on his slump. You could argue Jose Altuve for as well as he's playing this year. I mean, a guy his size should not have a 986 OPS.
He is the short man with a big bat. Love it.
Yes. um, Trout's injury complicates things too because he hasn't played a whole lot. Um, and then you got to rule out guys like what's his name, Garcia in Chicago, who's playing really well himself, but he's on a really bad team. Just the White Sox are
Yeah,
awful
no
this
one,
year.
no one from the White Sox is gonna win MVP for at least 2 years, if not three.
Yeah. I mean, you could make a case for George Springer because he's been an all-around guy for the Astros this year. Didi Gregorius is surprised as one of the best players on that Yankees squad. Pedroia is always up there.
Yeah, Looking here on via Fangraphs, Aaron Judge and Jose Altuve are tied in WAR right now. So there was such a big gap that no one thought that Judge could be caught. No,
No,
Altuve's done it. Now
yeah,
that's part of that's Aaron Judge's recent struggles, but I mean you can't say that Jose
I mean
Altuve is having a mediocre season.
he's batting 359 according to MLB.com. That's good
he's
for second place is Garcia in Chicago for the AL, and he is batting 318.
jeez. Well,
Second in the MLB is it Justin Turner in LA, and he's batting 335. I mean, he's far and away the best hitter in baseball this year.
yeah, and he's not a bad second baseman. So,
No,
and
he doesn't commit very many errors.
no. Um, so yeah, I guess for me, my picks, I think I'd either go Jose Altuve or Mike Trout, and that for me, it just depends on whether or not the Angels make the playoffs, and then whether or
Yeah,
not
that would
Mike
be
Trout
big.
continues to play at the pace he is since he got back from his injury. He's playing very,
Right.
very well, Mike Trout like. As long as he keeps up that pace, I think he's got a shot at catching Aaron Judge in WAR, and by that virtue, Jose Altuve. Angels don't make it, then I think it's Altuve. He's the best player on the best team in that league.
Can see that. Switch gears to the NL for a second, though. If the Marlins somehow manage to snag that second wild card, does Giancarlo Stanton have a case with the way he's been playing lately?
I think he's got a case, but I think the problem is that the Diamondbacks are going to be in that first wild card spot. And I just don't see how the voters can ignore Paul Goldschmidt for a second time.
Right, his slash is incredible this year.
He's an incredible hitter. He doesn't get the recognition he deserves because he plays in Arizona where they don't have as much media attention. He plays an extremely solid first base. He last time we talked, he was in top 5 in baseball or in National League for steals. So he's a first baseman who can steal bags. He can run well. He can field well, and he hits extremely well. He's got a oh, I don't have OPS on here. Well, if you like weighted
Going
runs created, he's got it looks like 153 or
going
153.
by OPS in the NL, Joey Votto leads with a 1038, followed by Bryce Harper at 1034, then Stanton at 1026, and Goldschmidt at 1014, and then in Colorado, Charlie Blackmon has a 1011 OPS. So that's a pretty loaded top four when you're thinking about talent.
Yeah,
Votto gets no
unfortunately,
consideration because
yeah,
the Reds are
unfortunately,
out, but
as good as Votto is, you're right. The Reds aren't gonna see an MVP candidate or MVP award come their way. Um, I guess if I, it's still going to be really surprising if the wild card comes to Marlins, and so that probably will affect a lot of how people view Stanton's MVP case. Um,
the Marlins have 62 wins, so they're 6 games behind the Rockies.
yep. Well, and they just made. I mean, they're hot.
They're 8 and
They
2
just
their last
made
10.
500, and
Yeah.
it's really surprising. Again, it's
Yeah.
kind of one guy who's like not getting talked about at all across the board, and I don't think he's got a shot at the MVP, but he's having one heck of a season. Is Anthony Rendon, third baseman for the Nationals?
Yeah.
According to Fangraphs, he leads the National League in WAR at 5.6.
He's batting 300, 400 OBP. He has 66 walks compared to only 67 strikeouts, 22 home runs with 77 RBIs, 119 hits. I mean, he's doing it all.
He is,
For a very,
he,
very, very good team.
yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why he doesn't win the MVP. I think because he's surrounded by huge names like
Harper
Harper and Daniel Murphy. People are going to be like,
and
well,
Paul
he's
and Ryan
But
Zimmerman too. Don't
and
forget him.
Ryan Zimmerman, right? Sorry, I did forget him. And this is how much talent is on that team, and I think at some
Right.
point the voters might be like, "Well, he's that good because of all this talent that's surrounding him." Because as a pitcher, you can only walk three guys before you have to start getting outs. You run out of the
Right.
bases, and so maybe they could be viewed that Anthony Rendon is getting that treatment. I don't necessarily think that's what's happening.
No.
However, he's shown MVP like ability in the past. I think he was top three in 2014, and then he got injured. But he also has been flip floppy in his seasons. He's had really good seasons, and he's also had really bad seasons. And some of those seasons have been because of injury. But on the other hand, the Nationals have never really truly known what they had in Anthony Rendon. They see,
Right. But he looks like he's finally putting it together and
yeah,
not getting hurt. Fingers crossed.
yeah. There might be a big contract come his way. Well, with whatever money is left over after signing Bryce Harper to a $400 million deal.
If they do re-sign him.
If they do, I mean, I'd find it hard to believe that they don't. I just,
Yeah. Well,
I
yeah.
think Bryce, I think Bryce likes it enough there, and I think Washington is willing to put up the money. But let's move on. Let's talk about the big news that's been happening this year. The Miami Marlins are no longer owned by universally hated Jeffrey Loria.
Right.
Derek Jeter, the old
Universally
shortstop,
beloved.
yeah, universally beloved face of baseball, is now the owner of the Miami Marlins. And I can't remember who also bought him with him. He was a team effort. I mean, Jeter was the big name. I think it was another sports player though who bought it with them. But the biggest news is that Jeffrey Loria, who essentially killed the Montreal Expos and has tricked and treated Miami fairly awful in his time as the owner, is finally gone, which I think all baseball fans can rejoice.
Yeah.
And I think the Marlins may have, as a team, rejoice because I think they started their winning ways just before the sale was official.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Um,
they got on their hot streak right around the time it was announced. So
Maybe there's some
interesting.
positive workplace, I guess, makes for positive results, huh?
Right.
Another big news piece is the juiced ball conspiracy. At the beginning of the year, there had been some talk about how the baseball was different halfway through the year, and that had caused a slight increase in home runs. Um, Baseball released a Major League Baseball, and it released a experiment that they did, the results of an experiment that they did, and analyzing the ball, saying that the ball is not different, everything is peachy keen. Then in
Right.
the middle of May, we have all these home runs just happening left and right. Like people are hitting home runs that hadn't hit home runs in years. I mean, as a Pittsburgh fan and the writer, I noticed that guys like Josh Harrison and Jordy Mercer, who have topped more than 10 home runs like two or three times in their career, had already had five by the end of May. And it was like anyone who had warning track power all of a sudden had home run power. And it was very strange and suspicious. And what happened to really make this conspiracy grow is that the website The Ringer, one of their writers posted his own independent analysis where he had gone to a university and they had tested the ball and they found that the ball was bouncier. And what that meant was that the ball was flying farther. And so
Right.
now we have two, I think maybe now three independent studies saying the ball is different, while Major League Baseball is saying no, the ball is not.
Right. And Manfred recently said, wasn't it yesterday before the Tigers Yankees game, that basically it's not the balls, your pitchers are just worse. It's the pitcher's fault.
Yeah, I don't buy that at all.
No.
The 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 Major League Baseball as a whole broke the record for most home runs in a year, or in a not in a year, sorry, in a month.
On
In
pace to
June.
pass 6,000 for the season.
Yeah, I mean they're on pace to break the record, and they're probably really close to it already.
They're up
Um,
46% from last year.
that's an insane number. That is just so many more home runs.
Thank you, Detroit
Um,
News.
and you know what? I could maybe buy the theory that the pitchers are worse because, or not. I wouldn't buy the theory that pitchers are worse. I would buy the theory that hitters have a new hitting philosophy that the pitchers haven't adjusted to yet. Because
That could be.
recently, hitters have really gripped onto the three true outcomes, which is walk, strikeout, or get a home run. So you just swing for the fences every time. The poster boy for that is Joey excuse me, I almost said Joey Votto. It's not Joey Votto. It's
Joey
Joey
Gallo.
Gallo of the Texas Rangers, who has something like a 180 average, but he has over 30 home runs, I think, already. So if
Right.
when he hits the ball, it leaves the yard, but he's not hitting the ball that often. But he's providing enough value that he's getting playing time, and so I guess you could say that the reason there's so many home runs is because so many hitters are taking that approach now. But then you throw in the fact that there's been more blister injuries uh, to pitchers than ever before, and multiple sources are saying that if you change the seams the way the seams are, so if you make it tighter, so you make the seams bigger, that would cause more issues when you try to spin the ball. And so, like I said before, they found that the ball was bouncier, which meant the ball was more tightly wound, which made it slightly smaller. And
Right.
so the theory is that that is what's causing all the blisters. And players have said that, maybe not in such direct terms, but there's been tweets and Instagram posts, especially from Marcus Stroman, who
Yes.
has said he's like, I've never had a problem with blisters my entire career pitching. And he's been pitching since he was a little kid, so he knows the baseball. He knows whether or not he's had blisters on
Right.
his hands. And so it's different if you was like you all of a sudden we had all these guys who were acting like Rich Hill, who Rich Hill changes the grip on each different pitch. Like he throws like two different kinds of curveballs, all right, and so that wears down your fingers. But the guys
Right.
who are getting these blister injuries aren't those type of guys. They've been in the league for a while and they have their established pitches, but they're getting these blister injuries.
And it's very sudden.
Yeah, and I think there's something up, and I feel like right now Robert Manfred is taking the Roger Goodell playbook with the whole
Yeah.
dealing with the conspiracy. Now this is not as big as the concussion thing, but I don't see what the problem is with him saying like, look, the balls did change, or we changed it for this reason, or something like that. Like I think they just need to come clean because baseball
Yeah.
is experiencing a lot of popularity right now, or resurgence, and you don't want to, you got this trust, and you don't want to have another steroids-esque fall, you know.
Yeah. That would be just if something like that happened again in baseball, it'd be a killer.
Yeah, it would. Now, I don't think a juiced ball is as big as a steroid thing,
No, not at all.
but the fact that the league office keeps saying it's not a thing, and then it's like, well, then you lose the trust. And like, well, I don't trust this front office, or I don't trust the guys who are running the game anymore. And so once you lose that trust, people are going to stop tuning in,
Yeah.
and that's going to cause all kinds of problems, which is just, to me, it doesn't make any sense how you could do that. The Cubs just won the World Series. People are paying attention to baseball.
Right. That
And
World Series Game 7. Almost everybody had it in their top 5 all time.
yeah, I mean, I had multiple friends who had basically never watched a baseball game of their free will stay up to watch that entire game.
Right. I had a test the next day and didn't really care.
Well, I was in bed watching it, and I had to get up at like 6 or 7 in the morning. And when that rain delay happened, I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" And I actually texted my friends who were watching it, and I told them, as soon as this rain delay comes back, you call me until I wake up because I'm not missing history because either the
Right.
Cubs are going to lose again, and the Cleveland was going to break their 50-odd year curse, or the Cubs were going to break their 100-year curse, and I wanted to see it either way.
Right.
So we've talked a lot about what's happened this year. So let's transition to some of the news from the last couple weeks more recently. I specifically want to talk about the Little League Classic / the Players Weekend that is coming up this week. Major League Baseball has teamed up with Little League, and they had a game that was between the Pittsburgh Pirates and the St. Louis Cardinals. It was in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, where the Little League World Series is every year, and so they
Yeah.
had uh, a game where it was almost all Little League players from the who were participating in the World Series, and they got to watch the game. The Pirates or the players got to interact with them, and I thought it was a great event. I just thought like
Yeah.
they need to. I feel like baseball needs to engage youth, and I thought that was a perfect way to do it.
Oh yeah. If baseball can engage more youth, that's one big way to grow popularity. Not necessarily even making big changes at the big league level. It's you have to get to these kids early. Like football, the NFL has play 60. The NBA is everywhere for these kids. You can find a gym or a court in practically every town.
Yeah,
And the the MLB's kind of struggled with this. They've kind of started the RBI movement, the revive baseball in inner cities and their urban youth academies and stuff. But this is would be a great way for them to get into the new generation and try to get them interested in watching.
yeah, and so I thought this was a great first step, and then they took another step, which is going to happen this weekend. Um, Sorry, excuse me. So this weekend, every team has different uniforms, and I can't remember what they're calling it, but they're calling the uniforms. But they're stylized. They're only going to be there's only four colors, primary colors to choose from. And so they change their uniforms, and then every player has a patch on his sleeve where he writes someone who influenced him or helped him get to the big leagues, and then on the back of the jersey instead of their last name, it's a nickname of their choosing. And
Yeah.
then they also get to wear stylized, personalized cleats, gloves, batting gloves, just like everything. And I think it's going to be a great weekend. I'm actually going to go see one of the games where you just get to see. It's cool when you see a player kind of decked out in some different gear. There's some personalization in football, and people always go crazy whenever they see guys with cool gloves or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be the
Like
same thing.
yeah.
Have you read the nicknames? Any of the nicknames?
I've read some of the Reds
What
nicknames.
what was your
I
favorite
haven't
one?
the Joey Votto one, it's Tonki 2. It goes back to a reference when do you remember the one year Shin-Soo Choo was in Cincinnati?
Yeah.
He well Shin-Soo Choo was constantly a step ahead of Votto in the OBP race. And they were talking about it one day. He was joking with Chu, and he's like, "Man, do you ever go to the dog track?" And he's like, "Yeah." And talking about it, and he's like, "Do you know the Tonki 1 and Tonki 2?" He goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "That's how I feel right now. You're Tonki 1 and I'm Tonki 2." And it just
that's
kind of stuck.
that's funny. That's cool. My favorite is Pirates closer Felipe Rivero, who has really burst onto the scene. He's throwing 100 miles from the left side. He's basically Aroldis Chapman with a little less speed, but a lot more control. And he's been really scary for opponents to see. And his nickname apparently is Nightmare, which is just awesome nickname for a closer. Like I can't really think of a better one. Um, but that's exciting this week. Um, so let's talk about who's hot and who's not.
Let's see. I mean, we talked about the Marlins. They're 8-2 in their last 10. Finally broke 500. Kind of correlates with the sale of the team, but the real Giancarlo Stanton's just on a tear.
He is. I think he had like 6 home runs in 5 games. I think is what it was. Like every day I was getting a notification.
Yeah,
It was like, there's the daily Stanton home run notification.
right. He's at 46 for the year in
Jeez.
122 games. Like he's got 46 home runs and 457 at bats. He's homering at a rate of less than 10 at bats per home run.
Man, that is just scary. He's so good. Yeah, I think Miami's my pick for the hot team for this week. Like you said, they're 8-2. They've won 3 straight. Um, they are a scary team right now. I think they'll probably get a little less scary when Stanton finally cools off. But Stanton was so cold to begin the year, he might not cool off.
Right.
So I think the team that's the coldest right now has got to be either between the three of St. Louis, Colorado, or Pittsburgh. Uh, Pittsburgh is 2-8, and basically has won 2 games in what feels like the last month. They've just continually lost and lost and lost, and they cannot get to that 500 mark. However, St. Louis and Colorado have also fallen off the pace, and they've currently lost 3 straight.
And I got to throw the Rays in there too, because they're still kind of in striking distance for that wild card, but if they get much colder, it's not really going to be. They're
Yeah,
not going to have a chance.
it's
Three
not
and
gonna.
seven in the last 10. They have won 2 in a row, but still, that 3-7 is discouraging.
Yeah, they got to turn something around. It seems all of a sudden like they were a lock for the wild card after the All-Star game, All-Star break. I mean, they had a good enough team. I thought they could catch up enough, but I don't know. I don't really know what happened there. Um,
Yeah.
so since this is our first podcast, we won't be recapping last week as much as we will in actual podcasts, just because we spent so much time talking about catching up on what's happened earlier in the year. So for now, we're gonna stop talking about last week. Instead, we're gonna talk about our pick for under the radar game of the week. Something we'll do every week where we pick two teams, or not two teams, a game where we think that people should watch and might not watch because it's not going to have aces like Strasburg or Kershaw. Like we're trying to think of get teams that or games that will be important, but might be a little under talked about.
All right. So my pick, we just talked about the Rays being cold. Well, they face another team you mentioned this weekend. They face the Cardinals in a series that could end up being very important for both teams' playoff hopes. They start on Friday with Jake Odorizzi going against Michael Wacha. Moves to Saturday where they have Blake Snell versus Mike Leake. And Sunday they have going excuse me. And Sunday they have going Chris Archer and Lance Lynn. So I mean Chris Archer, you could consider him toward the top tier, but none of the other pitchers really jump off as wow.
Yeah,
So the whole series is kind of their very good
yeah.
but not great starters.
I'll be honest. When I
And
was looking, or sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
it's okay. So the whole series is they're very good but not great starters, and it could have potentially big playoff implications if the other.
So I think that pick is great. I think that pick is even better than my pick. It's so under the radar that I didn't even see it when I was looking for who was playing. And so I completely missed it. Which I think is bad on my part. But my pick is I believe it's the Saturday game between the Cleveland and the Kansas City. It's pits Jason Vargas against crap, I don't know his last name, but Merritt for Cleveland. Jason Vargas is the ace for the Kansas City Royals, but he is not the ace of any other team in the league, I don't think. But he's pitched well this year. Um, the big thing here is that Cleveland has suffered a bunch of injuries recently, and so their whole standing in AL Central is a little shaky. And if the Kansas City Royals kind of take 3 away from the Cleveland Indians, all of a sudden Kansas City is only 3 games back of the Central, and they probably catapult themselves a little bit closer to the wild card race because they're not that far out of it. So for Kansas City, this is a really big one, and for Cleveland to get more breathing room from Kansas City, I think is really important. I don't think that Minnesota Twins can continue to get wins, and so it's more important for Cleveland to take out Kansas City than it is to take times whenever they get Minnesota.
Yeah, that's a pretty good pick too. I mean, if again could have big playoff implications if Cleveland doesn't win that division, they're gonna have to fight for their lives
Yeah, and
in
they
the
have
wild card race.
yeah, and the big news is they have to do it without Andrew Miller for they don't know how long. So their big, basically fireman reliever, and then they also just lost Danny Salazar, who was a came back from the minors a couple weeks ago and had been really throwing really well and looked like a good part of the rotation. And then all of a sudden he's injured again, or not again, but injured.
Right.
So
So that
well,
Cleveland's got some problems, but that KC series is going to be vital.
yeah, for sure. So it's the second to last weekend in August. So playoffs are around the corner, and I can't wait. And it's going to get crazy, I'm sure.
Yep.
So, on behalf of all of Armchair, I would like to thank you for listening to our podcast. Make sure to check in next week. Like I said before, it's a weekly podcast, so we want you to tune in every week. Our Twitter for this podcast is not up yet, but feel free to tweet at either myself or Donnie. We'll have that link up on our page. Make sure to follow Armchair for all other sports news. We got you covered, all right? All right, thanks for listening.